Good afternoon, YouTube viewers and subscribers. What I've got on my table here is an awesome gift from a gentleman named Mark, and friend of mine, that he gave this to me probably, I don't know, a year and a half ago or so. And I look at this thing quite frequently, and it's kind of an amazing book, and it's only volume 2. But it's funny because this video, I'm actually doing a video of an engine that's actually in this book, and it just so happens to be one of the very first pages, and it's right here. This guy right here. It's a 1958 McCord Spitfire. Now that engine just so happens to be right here in my hands now, and I'm still completely awestruck by this engine, because I had seen this thing on eBay, and I'll just rotate it around while I babble. I had seen this thing on eBay back in August, and my jaw dropped at that time, and I think at that time it was listed at $150, and I kind of started to do a little bit of research on it. Wasn't really sure, didn't find a whole lot, didn't know a whole lot about the engine. Well, then it just kind of disappeared, and I didn't see it again until maybe a week or so ago, and it was listed at I think $100 or make offer, and the day was coming close to the end of that particular auction again, and I threw a $75 bid on it, thinking, you know, I really want the engine because it's incredibly rare, but I didn't think I'd get it. Well, lo and behold, I did. The offer was accepted. So I started getting really excited, and I told my good friend John about it. And John did a lot of research, sent me a lot of links, and I'm going to share those links that he sent to me in the general description of this video. He sent those links to me. I started reading more information about it. Found out that this is actually designed by a gentleman named Mel Anderson, who started designing engines back in 1932. And he designed many. He was probably one of the first American designers of glow engines, or I won't say glow, small displacement engines for model aircraft. And I don't know the full history of Mel Anderson, but at some point in time he designed this engine, and I don't know what happened. And then I don't know exactly the time frame, but around the mid-50s or late 50s, a gentleman by the name of Bob McCord acquired all of these old, I don't know if he acquired the patents or what, but he acquired these old parts for these engines. So this is actually a McCord, even though it says Anderson Spitfire, it's actually a McCord Spitfire 65 RC engine. Now most of these engines were made as ignition, and they had a spark plug with points and a timing system on the front, but a few were made to be glow engine versions, and this is probably right about right when glow engines were first coming out. In fact, I don't know exactly when the first glow plug came out, but the plug that's in this engine is extremely old, and hopefully I'll be able to show that to you. I pulled it out, and let me just show you this real quick. It doesn't even have a copper washer, and look at the top of that plug. It's a kind of an idle bar thing. It's got like a piece of metal, a real thin piece of metal, kind of tack welded to the bottom of it to serve as an idle bar. And I did put my igniter on this thing, and it does actually glow. So that's incredible. So this engine dates back to 1958, and there's actually one of the research things that John found was he found an eBay ad that's still active, I believe, a one-page ad for these engines when they were re-released in 1958, and I'll put the picture of that here on this video too, so you can see that. So that's the proof that this is a 65 glow, Anderson Spitfire 65 glow engine with the original stock K&B Allen carburetor on it, and from 1956. Now, when I was waiting for this engine to arrive in the mail, I was I was thinking back to the Profi 61. I'm thinking, the Profi 61 was a brand new in-box engine, but that son of a gun was just locked up tight as a drum. And I really had to put a lot of effort into that engine to get that thing freed up and operational. And when I was waiting for this to come, I was like, geez, who knows? I don't know much about this engine. The fellow that sold it didn't know much about it other than he found it in his attic. Is all he told me. He found it in his attic. He didn't even try to turn it over. And to be honest with you, it even came with this prop, which is an Olsen Rice OR F60H 14.6 prop. Which I don't know how old this prop is, but for as much as I know, this prop could date back to the 50s also. So he had this prop on there and pictures of the prop on and off, but he never actually tried to turn the engine over, because I sent the seller a couple of messages asking, what's the condition of the engine, because it didn't say on the ad. And he didn't seem to know much about it. But so the bottom line is, when this thing arrived today, I'm thinking, holy crap, am I going to have a whole lot of trouble getting this thing to turn over? And I've been holding off doing this until right now. This engine is free like you would not believe. I was blown away by the fact that this engine is freed up like that. So, the original ignition engines, this rear cover had a plastic bubble fuel tank on it. And that's obviously where the fuel was. And the fellow that sold this engine was saying, well, he thinks there's parts missing. He said parts missing. So John, in the research he was doing, showed me some pictures of these having this bubble fuel tank on here. Well, it turns out there are no parts missing from this RC version. So I was looking at this and I saw, well, I see some bosses here, but I don't see a means to take this rear cover off. Well, as it turns out, this rear cover unscrews. And I'm going to unscrew it right now. It's free. I didn't heat this engine up. I have not put a single drop of oil anywhere on this engine. This engine is exactly as it came out of the box, just not 35-40 minutes ago. This is the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. This is probably one of the most unbelievable engines I've ever had in my hands, and one of the oldest. So here's the cover. It's got a very thin little kind of rubberish gasket. I won't say it's an O-ring because it's not. But here's what the inside of this engine looks like. Now, this little prop nut thing. But look at this. Look how free this thing is. This little prop nut it's just got hexes there. It keeps sliding off. But look at this, listen. It's even got compression. Now, the kicker is, if you look down in here, this is not a ringed engine. They had a ringed version, but this is a lapped iron piston apparently, because there is no ring visible there. So, and I think they had two versions. I think they had a ringed and then this lapped iron piston, and it says that in that ad for this engine. So I mean, this thing is just immaculate. There's no real marring on the anodized surfaces. This is all original, made from parts that Bob McCord, I think it's called McCord Precision Products is the name of the company back then, out of Anaheim, California, that were putting these, maybe assembling these engines. I don't know if they made parts or if they just purchased the remainder of some parts that had already been made and made them into engines or what. I don't really know that full story. All I know is I've got this thing for under $100 and I'm giddy. I'm completely giddy. Now, the kicker is, and this carb is completely free too, everything is free on this engine. The kicker is, do I run this engine? I mean, my heart of hearts really wants me to run this engine. But it's actually, I can really be confident in saying, using the term vintage. This is a vintage engine because it's well over 50 years old. And it's in perfect condition. So my quandary is, do I actually run this thing? I want to run it. Should I run it? I don't know. The other question is, if I run it, should I run it with that glow plug? And the other thing is, what kind of fuel did they have? What kind of glow fuel did they have back in the late 50s? I have no idea. I don't know if they were using nitromethane, if it was just straight methanol and castor. So I'm not even really sure what fuel I would run in this. I mean, obviously I could try FAI, which is just methanol and castor, or I could just go with 5%. But man, I don't know. It's a tough one. But anyway, this was a quick look, probably not so quick because I'm babbling so much, and a somewhat look inside of this vintage McCord Anderson Spitfire 16 glow engine.